smell on the wind. By 5:41 every morning, before the respectable people had begun lying to themselves about how much they loved the sunrise, I already knew whether civilization had held together through the night. Most mornings it had. Some mornings, some asshole cooked monkey. People think I'm joking because they lack the olfactory sense to distinguish monkey from pork. That is not my burden. My burden is my left arm. The first warning is never pain. No, pain would at least be courteous. No, the warning is a slow, electrical murmur beginning somewhere around the elbow, creeping down into the hand like invisible ants wearing government-issued boots. The fingers become negotiable, and then my finger's grip loses confidence. And because you refuse to recognize their sovereignty of smell, the Republic goes on alert. I sat in my recliner, wearing precisely as many clothes as the Constitution required, which, inside my own home, was a matter still under vigorous legal review by the Supreme Court of the Independent Republic of Dagestan. Outside, the neighborhood slept. Lady, my service dog, sweetly cooed as she slept free of odorous monkey meat smells. Carson, Lady's littermate and defender of the Free Republic of Dagestan, occasionally huffed in his dreams, no doubt chasing some imaginary duck that had violated airspace or made a border incursion. Jasper the cat had once again become liquid and occupied a chair or space on the floor, as only a dog would normally. They slept peacefully, which meant the monkey meat smell attack was directed solely at me. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Not strong, just enough. The unmistakable faint aroma of half-cooked monkey meatloaf riding the morning air. "Damn it," I whispered. They've switched facilities. The official maps insisted that the new data centers existed to process information, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, national infrastructure. Nobody asked the obvious question. If these places generated enough heat to cool entire football fields full of computers, why did they always smell vaguely like monkeys on humid mornings? Coincidence? Please, Bert. I've worked around government facilities. I've seen procurement. The average taxpayer imagines laboratories full of geniuses run these facilities. The average government employee knows the contract is awarded to the lowest technically qualified bidder. The lowest bidder always has an idea, and unfortunately, more often than not, the burden of technical qualification is merely proven with fancy words in a proposal. Somewhere, there existed a contract. Unfortunately, I didn't have the winning bid, but understood the technical requirement, or at least I thought I did for this particular contract solicitation. And not winning is why I'm bitching about it now, at least in part. Section C, Server Cooling Solution. Contractor shall provide one frozen, half-cooked monkey meatloaf per server rack. Replacement authorized upon thaw. Odor migration is considered incidental. Warranty covers equipment only. Veterans affected by airborne primate emissions shall submit complaints through normal administrative channels. This little bit is hidden, is some obscure boilerplate contract item, hidden even deeper in a set of OSHA requirements that may or may not need to be followed by certain government agencies, and then the EPA bureaucrat nonsense that somehow has very little concern for monkey meat fume effects, but they get fired up about woodpeckers that need protecting in Georgia. People call me eccentric. I call myself observant. Those are often confusing terms. They say I believe in strange things. I say I have simply driven more miles at stranger hours than they have. Spend enough nights crossing Oklahoma City between hospitals. Spend enough years visiting emergency departments at 2 a.m. Spend enough dawns watching neighborhoods wake before respectable society notices they exist. I began seeing patterns, not conspiracies. Patterns. Goldfish, for instance. The public knows almost nothing about goldfish. Ask anyone, what do goldfish do? They will shrug as they answer, swim, eat flakes, forget things every 3 seconds. These people are idiots with highly sophisticated and diverse bioaquatic culture right under their noses. Our local goldfish observe sober Shabbat. As a matter of religious heritage, no driving, no gambling in person. Instead, they employ middlemen, remarkably ethical fish. I admire them. The first microphone I ever dropped was entirely accidental. Everybody thought it was dramatic. It wasn't. Monkey vapor had caused my body to reach a neurological threshold. My left hand simply resigned. The microphone struck the floor. The audience gasped. I bent over, retrieved it with my right hand, held it near my mouth from knee level, and continued. Ladies and gentlemen, is this the free America you wish to inhabit? Silence. One where the monkey abstinence movement is marginalized? A woman applauded, probably by accident. The frozen monkey Meatloaf is, according to the lowest bidder, an acceptable industrial coolant. More silence. I disagree. Someone laughed. Good. Laughter means they're listening. Meanwhile, the independent Republic of Duckistan occupies a modest portion of my backyard. Foreign governments refuse recognition. Their loss. The Republic enjoys stable borders, excellent ducks, reasonable immigration policy, healthy tomato production, an unusually competent intelligence service, considering most of it consists of dogs watching fences. I defend the Republic with absolute seriousness, until doing so would conflict with my oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That oath outranks backyard diplomacy. Everything else remains negotiable. When I announced my candidacy for mayor, everyone assumed I had finally lost my mind. This amused me. The city had previously tolerated candidates wearing boots on their heads. Candidates whose sole campaign promise involved rent being too high. Candidates with numerical tax philosophies. Compared with them, stop cooling servers with monkey Meatloaf. Felt refreshingly practical. The incumbent, however, was another matter. Mayor de Jesus Quintana. Not the Jesus. The other one. Purple-clad. Hair immaculate. Bowling shirts sharp enough to shave with. The Jesus. He could be mayor here for a bit longer, but he is in the way of my mayoral stepping stone to greatness. Every campaign appearance ended the same way. He'd lean into the microphone, spread his hands, smile. This aggression against server cooling will not stand, man. The crowd cheered. He called himself a libertarian. Technically true. The way powdered cheese technically qualifies as dairy. He belonged to the sort of libertarian organization that held 3-hour meetings, debating whether committees violated individual liberty before voting to establish a committee to investigate committee formation. His platform was simple. Freedom, innovation, property rights, server autonomy, no regulation of cooling methods. If a private corporation wished to refrigerate military-grade computers using frozen monkey meat products, who was government to interfere? I considered this position morally indefensible. People simply should not eat monkey meat. My first city council appearance drew 38 citizens, 7 reporters, 3 veterans, 1 extremely confused zoning official. The smell arrived halfway through public comments. My arm tingled. I smiled. Perfect timing. Everyone knows monkey meat vapor and/or airborne particulate from even a capybara can cause severe neuropathy and insomnia in a select veteran population group. I approached the podium. My left hand refused the microphone. The right accepts responsibility. I cleared my throat, looked directly at the council, then spoke the sentence that would eventually divide an entire city. I believe what you believe is your business. Heads nodded. I believe how you live is your business. More nodding. I leaned forward. But if your monkey smoke crosses the border, my left hand buzzed like a transformer. A veteran in the back slowly stood. We're going to have words, man. This monkey business has gone far enough. The room became impossibly quiet, not because everyone agreed, because somewhere beyond the council chambers, the smell and smoke carried gently on the Oklahoma wind. Someone had just opened the smoker containing monkey. Chapter 2. Public comment. The first rule of public comment is that nobody on the council wants the public to comment. They will deny this. They will smile. They will say things like, "We value citizen engagement," and "Your voice matters," and "Please keep remarks to 3 minutes." 3 minutes. A city can approve an industrial complex the size of a medieval province in less than an hour. But a citizen gets 3 minutes to explain why the air over his neighborhood smells like federal monkey loaf. This is how empires fall. Not with invasion, with timers. The little red light on the podium blinked at me like a coward. I ignored it. Councilwoman Stankel leaned toward her microphone and said, "Sir, your time has expired." "My left arm has also temporarily expired," I said, lifting it by the wrist with my good hand. "Yet, here we are." A few people laughed. The veterans did not. That mattered. The veterans watched the arm. They knew about limbs with moods. They knew about nerves that remembered what the mind had filed away under handled. They knew how weather could get into old wounds. They knew how smells could open doors no man remembered unlocking. Councilwoman Stankel looked to the city attorney. The city attorney looked down at his papers, which is what city attorneys do when they hope a problem becomes someone else's problem. Mayor de Jesus Quintana leaned back in his chair at the center of the dais, fingers laced over his stomach, rings shining under fluorescent light. He smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, politically. "Let the man finish," he said. The room shifted. Mayor Quintana understood performance. That was his gift. He could make mercy look like strength and mockery look like generosity. He wore a purple suit that night. Not a loud purple, a disciplined purple, the sort of purple that had made peace with itself. His hair was perfect. His mustache sat above his lip like it had been appointed by the governor. He looked like a man who had once committed fully to a bowling league and then accidentally discovered municipal power. "Thank you, Mayor," I said. He pointed at me with 2 fingers. "Freedom means hearing things we do not like, my friend." That drew applause. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had turned my own freedom against me before I could finish accusing him of defending monkey vapor. Fine. I looked back at the council. The issue before this city is not whether private companies have the right to operate data centers. I am not anti-data center. Let the record show that. I have defended data centers. I have worked around data centers. I understand heat loads, cooling demands, redundancy, power draw, infrastructure, and the sacred mystery of a locked server room. Nobody wants to admit smells like ozone and old carpet. A man in the second row nodded harder than he meant to. He was no doubt a data center engineer, a self-loathing one, or perhaps also reactive to exotic cooling loaf vapor. "But what I do not support," I continued, "is the use of half-cooked frozen monkey meatloaf as rack-level thermal mitigation." The timer blinked red again. "The contractor claims this is innovative." Mayor Quintana lifted one eyebrow. "I claim it is procurement malpractice." That landed better than monkey meat. People trust words like procurement. Makes madness wear shoes. I pulled a folder from under my arm and held it up. "This is a public records request." The city attorney's face changed. "Not much. Enough. I am requesting all communications between the city, the data center operators, subcontractors, vendors, food service suppliers, wildlife transport firms, meat processors, and any entity using the phrases alternative biomass cooling, organic, thermal buffering, primate-derived heat absorption, capybara-compatible packaging, or holiday brisket pilot program." The room went still. Mayor Quintana stopped smiling, only for a second. But I saw it. So did the veterans. That was the thing about veterans. People think training makes you brave. Sometimes, more often, it makes you observant. You notice when a smile reloads. A man near the back stood slowly. Gray beard, Vietnam hat, oxygen tube. He didn't speak. He just stood. Then another man stood, younger, Iraq, probably motor pool by the way he favored one knee and trusted neither chair nor floor. Then a woman stood, Desert Storm. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was not. One by one, they rose, not dramatically, no anthem, no flags, just bodies bearing witness. The council saw them. The cameras saw them. The mayor saw them. And for the first time that evening, the room understood that even if they did not believe a word I said about Monkey Loaf, something else had entered the chamber. The invisible had organized. Mayor Quintana leaned forward. "Are you finished, sir?" I looked at my folder. I looked at the veterans. I looked at my left hand, which had begun to return from wherever monkey vapor had sent it. "No," I said, "but I will stop for now. The news named me before I named myself. That is usually how public life begins. You do not get to choose your title. The city does." By noon the next day, I was Monkey Meat Man. By dinner, I was the anti-monkey candidate, though I had not yet announced a campaign. By the following morning, someone had made signs. Monkey Meat Man was right. Nobody knew about what. That helped. A cause does not need clarity at first. It needs rhythm. The first sign appeared at the corner of 12th and Santa Fe, zip-tied to a bent stop sign beneath a faded garage sale flyer. The second showed up outside a dispensary. The third was taped to the side of an ice machine. By Friday, the slogan had become a question. What are they cooling? That one had power. It was less ridiculous, almost responsible. A person could ask it at church without sounding like he had been awake since 5:41, smelling capybara vapors, flooding his personal olfactory organs. What are they cooling? Servers, they said. But everybody knew servers were not the whole answer. Cities cool many things. Anger, memory, lawsuits, economic development packages, campaign donors, veterans, especially veterans. A city knows exactly how to cool veterans. Thank them in public. Ignore them in paperwork. Give them a reserved parking space, then make the entrance too far away. Put flags on light poles. Name a stretch of road after a man who died young and never fixed the potholes on it. By Sunday, I had decided to run for mayor. Not because I wanted to. Wanting is for amateurs. I decided because nobody else seemed willing to say the obvious thing into a microphone. If the air makes old wounds speak, maybe we ought to test the air. Now, do I also intend to exploit these old wounds politically? Absolutely. I will serve myself first. It would be irresponsible of me not to. What kind of elected official would I be if I did not represent the public in such a way? If the voters of Moore choose to elevate me to the mayor's office, I fully intend to sign legislation while smoking a blunt behind the mayor's desk, as well as drink on the job. I understand. I've been informed repeatedly. Apparently, you are not allowed to do that. If you think these plans so terrible, you may want to hold on for the possibility of me as the President of the United States to see what Ivanka and I can and will do with $27 worth of cheap cocaine. Of course, to avoid confusion, and hold the power I so intend to abuse. Then I shall sign the legislation first. Procedure matters. Besides, nobody dreams of dying mayor of Moore. No offense. This is a stepping stone. Governor next. Then, if Providence continues smiling upon the Republic and the voters continue displaying remarkably questionable judgment, then I am elected United States Senator. Not forever. I almost certainly would not get reelected, and I believe in term limits. I want the Senate for just long enough. I have a very specific ambition. One day, somewhere far from Oklahoma, in a city that has never heard of me, after perhaps one drink too many and entirely by accident, I intend to become loudly involved in someone else's conversation, and rudely at that. The details hardly matter. It could be at a restaurant, hotel lobby, airport. State fair, congressional reception, wherever liberty requires. Some poor soul will eventually say, "Sir, I think you've had enough." To which I shall rise with every ounce of dignity remaining in my body, straighten an invisible tie that has long since surrendered. I mocked, straightening a tie I clearly wasn't wearing, and continued addressing the audience. The crowd of reporters and hangers-on and even De Jesus supporters laughed at this remark, as I wore no such tie and had not the slightest intention of wearing anything but Ranger. Panties in office. I continued. When my ghost tie is straight, I will at that time address the person I have chosen to accost and point a finger possessing far more confidence than balance, and proclaim, "I am a United States Senator, goddammit. I also reserve the right for brevity. I'm a goddamn senator, but this only really works if you are in the United States. However, I intend the use of my rank during those 2 years abroad, in any case. I intend this action not because it settles the argument. It doesn't. Not because it grants authority over the situation. It won't. But because every senator since the founding of the Republic has, at least once in his heart, wanted to say it exactly that way, pretending that it held. The weight of the Roman and American Republic, or any other fucking republic, where corruption means, shut up, because I said so, and I'm a goddamn senator. History simply omits those moments. Afterward, I'll apologize, probably, depending on whether they were cooking monkey. That last part remains negotiable. You may think these are poor reasons to seek higher office. I respectfully or disrespectfully, if you like. But I would prefer not to go the way of the Neanderthal, but instead, in the words of the rapper known as Currency, we can get down into some player shit. And so, as a fellow player, if you will, I disagree and see the use and or misuse of a positional title as a perfectly reasonably and respectable ambition for public service. The truly dangerous politicians are the ones who insist they seek power only out of pure, selfless devotion. Those people worry me. A man who admits he'd like the title because it sounds magnificent when shouted in another state after too much whiskey. That man is at least honest. Besides, the monkey situation isn't solving itself. Chapter 3. The debate season. Campaigns are peculiar things. You spend 6 months convincing strangers you're qualified to solve problems they didn't know they had, while your opponent spends the same 6 months explaining why you're the sort of person who shouldn't be trusted with a stapler. Democracy, properly understood, is simply competitive storytelling, interrupted every few years by yard signs. Mayor de Jesus Quintana understood this. He never argued with me directly. That would have elevated me into the relevant and non-absurd. Instead, he argued with the version of me he'd carefully constructed in the public imagination. My opponent, he'd say, smiling as though he'd personally invented good manners, would like the city to regulate aromas. The crowd laughed, not because it was true, because it was close enough to be funny. That is the danger of a good politician. The best ones don't lie. They rearrange emphasis. He'd continue. He wishes to create an office of atmospheric investigation. Laughter. A department of suspicious odors. More laughter. A bureau of monkey affairs. Standing ovation. I wrote every one of those down. Why interrupt while he's naming your future department's government expansion? Is exactly what a libertarian wants if he wants to keep winning until he can cuss out some asshole on the beach. As a United States Senator, goddammit. By the next debate, we'd already printed letterhead. The Bureau of Monkey Affairs occupied the folding table between the lawn fertilizer and an extension cord that had survived 3 permanent change of station moves and at least 1 direct encounter with a shovel. The Ministry of Aromatic Sovereignty operated from an overturned orange Home Depot bucket. Officially, it served as headquarters. Unofficially, it was the same bucket the kids used to collect dog shit in the backyard, though they had the decency to line it with a trash bag first. Civilization hangs by such courtesies. The Republic's mayoral campaign operated on an astonishingly efficient budget. Our entire annual appropriations bill could have been financed by returning aluminum cans, which was fortunate. Our city had enthusiastically embraced voluntary recycling. You voluntarily loaded the cans into your own truck, voluntarily burned your own gasoline, voluntarily drove them across town to the municipal recycling bins, and voluntarily congratulated yourselves on participating in a program the city had very nearly convinced itself it was providing. Mayor de Jesus called that freedom. I called it assigning homework. The mayor's office around here wasn't particularly powerful. People imagined a mayor as some imperial executive issuing decrees from behind a massive desk. Not ours. The mayor mostly held the gavel, ran the meetings, kept things moving. The real machinery lived elsewhere. Council votes, planning commissions, economic development committees, advisory boards, people with titles no citizen could remember until they wanted something built behind his house and needed their approval. That was where influence accumulated. Mayor de Jesus understood that better than anyone. He knew that if you couldn't always decide the outcome, you could often decide the conversation. Sometimes that's worth even more. He could take a room full of citizens asking one question, and somehow, 45 minutes later, have them arguing about a completely different one. It's a remarkable political gift. Magicians make rabbits disappear. Good municipal politicians make the original agenda disappear. DeJesus would say some absurd shit when asked about a vote on parks improvement bonds like, D-man, the man who wants to take over as mayor. Yeah, he has a plan. To smoke a blunt, that's what he said, not me. He wants to do that, and he calls himself Captain Big Dick. My people say he was and is and never will be a fucking Captain Man. He's a fucking Louie. A 1-liter tea man, that's it. And the big. Maybe it is big around, but not long. And do you want to call the man that? Captain Big Dick. You want your children to have a man like that as mayor? Truly ironic, considering DeJesus is a registered sex offender, as is the Honorable Councilwoman Stankel. Well, actually, she was a star in several venial films, an adult actress, as it were, in the parlance of our time. Our campaign went on. Donnie became acting deputy undersecretary for smells we couldn't quite identify. He accepted the appointment with visible pride. His duties consisted almost entirely of saying, "Yeah, that's odd," whenever anyone mentioned an unfamiliar odor. He excelled, mostly at drinking all my beer. Government is mostly finding people whose natural habits already resemble a job description. Celeste refused every title I offered. "I'll help," she said, "but I'm not becoming Secretary of Monkey." "Why not?" "Because one day someone will put that on a resume." She had a point, but eventually accepted the role. Earl accepted a folding chair in the corner and nothing more. He claimed campaigns always invented too many offices. "The fewer titles," he said, "the fewer people who mistake themselves for important." I made a note to ignore that advice later. Campaigns, like republics, naturally accumulate committees. You don't notice it happening. One day you're sharing Coveffe, and yes, I do mean Coveffe. It's the official campaign drink, when we are out of beer, all of which we drink around a folding table in my garage office. The next day, somebody has drafted by laws governing whether Jasper the Cat counts as foreign intelligence. The vote failed. Not because anyone trusted Jasper, because nobody believed he worked for only one government. Chapter 3 continued. The first debate. The first televised debate wasn't held in City Hall. Nobody went to City Hall for shit. City Hall here is no hall, it's offices. You go there to pay your taxes or some shit. The fuck should I know the plight of the average man and property taxes? I pay none. I could hardly believe there were enough interested parties. But there we were, everyone interested as fuck was held in the Civic Event Center, a building that somehow managed to host bridal expos, reptile conventions, high school robotics tournaments, antique tractor auctions, and constitutional crises without ever changing the carpet. Government has buildings like that. You never notice them until democracy accidentally wanders inside. The moderator, a local television personality, with perfect hair and the emotional range of a parking meter, welcomed everyone to the first mayoral debate. Our first question concerns economic development. Mayor Jesus Quintana smiled. I smiled back. Economic development was his home field. Monkey vapor was mine. My question is for both candidates, she said. The proposed Hyperion Regional Compute Campus lies outside the city limits, but is expected to influence employment, utilities, and future growth throughout the metropolitan area. What role should this city play? Mayor DeJesus didn't even wait for the applause. None. More applause. The campus isn't ours. He spread his hands. It isn't inside our city. More applause. It isn't our tax base. He pointed toward the audience. It isn't our zoning. Another wave of applause. So, what exactly do you expect this council, or the next mayor, to do? He looked directly at me. Invade the neighboring city? Laughter. Annex their industrial district? More laughter. Declare war on refrigeration? The room loved him. I couldn't blame them. He was good, very good. Then he looked at me with the sort of smile that makes reporters sit up straighter. My opponent has become quite concerned about industrial aromas. A little laughter. I sympathize. More laughter. I truly do. He placed a hand over his heart. But unless he's proposing a municipal perfume ordinance, the audience chuckled. Or perhaps a Bureau of Fragrant Compliance. They laughed harder. I'm afraid I fail to see what practical authority the city possesses. He paused. There it was. The room belonged to him. Not because he had defeated me, because he had asked the question everyone was already thinking. He turned toward me. So, the moderator nodded. The floor is yours. I stood, not dramatically, driving into the debate. I thought to myself that the dramatic men always lose my attention, and I don't want to be bored with myself here. I adjusted the microphone. My opponent is correct. The audience blinked. Mayor de Jesus blinked. I continued. I have no authority over another city's industrial policy. I nodded. No authority over their permits. Another nod. No authority over their cooling systems. The audience relaxed. Some smiled as I went on. I also have no authority over the weather. Silence. No authority over the wind. More silence. But the wind, I looked toward the back of the room, appears to possess no respect whatsoever for municipal boundaries. The laughter stopped. You see? I folded my hands behind my back. Cities are imaginary. The moderator looked confused. Property lines are real. A few heads tilted. Survey stakes are real. More heads. Mailing addresses are real. I pointed toward the ceiling. But air, I let the sentence hang, has proven remarkably difficult to convince. Nobody moved. It simply refuses to stop at the welcome sign. The room had become very quiet. I continued. So, no. I cannot regulate another city's choices. I wouldn't even if I could. Freedom matters. Ownership matters. Responsibility matters. But when the consequences of those choices drift across a property line, I looked toward Mayor de Jesus. The conversation no longer belongs exclusively to the people who made them. He watched me carefully, not smiling now, listening. I respected that. He respected arguments, even inconvenient ones. I have no interest in telling another city how to live. I shrugged. I have every interest in asking what eventually reaches my front porch. That was enough. No applause, no laughter. Just thinking. Thinking is harder to interrupt than applause. The moderator cleared her throat. Mayor de Jesus. He leaned back in his chair. I appreciate the sentiment. He nodded politely. I truly do. He smiled again. But my opponent has once again delivered a passionate speech without proposing a single policy. There it was. The audience stirred. Fair question. I raised one finger. I have 4. The moderator looked surprised. I thought you said you didn't. I said I didn't have authority over their city. I smiled. I didn't say I lacked imagination. The audience laughed. Not at me. With me. I reached into the waistband of my ranger panties, slightly damp and with the ink a bit runny, a piece of folded notebook paper, creased enough to suggest it had been carried for weeks, right there, and damp enough with sweat to believe it. My first proposal, I unfolded it, is to establish the Neighborhood Air Observation Network. Mayor de Jesus grinned. You made that up. I absolutely did. I answered. Laughter. So did every founder of every government office you've ever admired. More laughter. The second, I continued, is voluntary neighborhood monitoring. The third, independent public disclosure of industrial emergency response plans that affect surrounding communities. A few people stopped smiling. The fourth, I folded the paper, is to ask questions before calling citizens crazy. Let's have a beer and talk it out face to face. Let's town hall the right way. Nobody laughed. Not because the monkey question had become more believable, because everyone in the room had, at some point in life, noticed something before anyone else did. Sometimes they had been right, sometimes they hadn't, but everyone remembered being dismissed. That memory belonged to all of us. Mayor de Jesus looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled again. You know, he said, you almost had me until the monkey. I smiled back. Although I was sure he was drunk, and I really didn't know what he meant by this statement, I responded, "That's because everybody gets hung up on the monkey. I've been trying to talk about the wind all evening." Mayor de Jesus laughed before the audience did. He said, "The wind, man. I tell you what the wind blow, and after the wind blow, you going to get fucked." The audience was unmoved, except a few to laughter. This had become common theater for him, and in my own opinion, this unhinged behavior was exactly how he was elected. You see, de Jesus is known and registered as a sex offender. He says shit like this, but the people, for some reason, love his position on most topics concerning the city and turn a blind eye to his language, and that worried me. Because a man secures enough to laugh at his opponent is far more dangerous than one who merely insults him. The debate ended the way most debates do. Nobody changed their vote. Half the town declared victory before reaching the parking lot. The other half declared civilization over before starting their trucks. Reporters packed cameras. Volunteers folded chairs. Campaign signs disappeared into pickup beds like seasonal decorations. We were in the back room after the debate with the mayor and a few others. Donnie drank a beer, while Celeste worked a hustle with some guy named Hank for what I would rather not know, but Concealwoman Stankel's name was mentioned. Mayor de Jesus shook my hand. He smiled while hip-thrusting a barbell. The police department had forgotten during some training event. I smiled. Neither of us trusted the other enough to squeeze too hard. "See you at the next one," he said. "But you're gonna get fucked, my man," he said with a violent hip thrust in my direction. He walked away. For the first time since announcing my campaign, I found myself standing alone. Thank fucking God, I thought. I can't take a shit without, at a minimum, a duck wanting to wipe my ass for some future political favor. Campaigns are noisy. Being alone after one is louder. The Civic Events Center emptied itself into the Oklahoma night. Pickup trucks, minivans, teenagers with mufflers, loud enough to announce emotional insecurity from 3 blocks away. An old couple walked hand in hand toward a Buick that had somehow survived 3 presidents and 2 grandchildren learning to drive. Life resumed. Politics, despite its own opinion of itself, is rarely the center of anyone else's evening. I climbed into my truck. Lady looked up from the passenger seat. Carson didn't bother opening his eyes. He had attended enough meetings to stop giving a shit. Smart dog. I started the truck. The radio came alive with a collection of podcasts on Oklahoma issues I had my assistant Tammy put together for me. Somebody was arguing about taxes. Somebody was arguing about schools. A third. Somebody was arguing about whether freedom required less government or merely different government. Nobody mentioned monkey. Funny how that works. The whole town spent 3 weeks calling me Monkey Meat Man. Monkey meat is truly horrendous, as is all canned meat, especially cooked canned tuna or even microwave tuna. I raged internally. I mean, fuck. I drove home with the windows down. No speeches, no applause, no campaign staff. Just highway, streetlights, the familiar silhouette of water towers pretending to be mountains. When I reached the Republic, the Border Patrol greeted me with considerably more enthusiasm than the electorate. Lady inspected the perimeter. Carson performed his ceremonial stretch. Jasper ignored the entire constitutional process. Some governments never change. I stood in the backyard for a long time. The ducks had already gone to bed. The tomatoes had no interest whatsoever in politics. A breeze wandered across the fence. I closed my eyes. Nothing. Oh, monkey. No capybara. Not even microwaved canned tuna. Thank fucking God and all his goodness. Just summer. Maybe tomorrow civilization would hold together. Maybe some fool would fire up a smoker before dawn, and my left hand would once again begin negotiating its terms of employment as the monkey meat vapor hits my fragile nervous system. Before dawn, and my left hand would once again begin negotiating its terms of employment as the monkey meat vapor hits my fragile nervous system.
Monkey Meat Technologies, advancing strategic protein-based infrastructure.
In a fixed position, a triumph of modern industrial vision.
Monkey Meat Technologies, advancing strategic protein-based infrastructure.